Is wedding soup Italian? I found out recently that contrary to all of our values here in Pittsburgh, wedding soup is in fact not Italian. It was actually introduced to the people of Italy by the Spaniards. And when I heard of this, I was kind of mind blown because I thought, how could I believe something for so long that's simply so wrong? And then I started to ponder some other misconceptions that we have in our world. And something struck me. And it's something that affects us to a much greater degree than just wedding soup. And that's the misconceptions surrounding leadership and the practice of it. A few summers ago, I had the incredible opportunity to visit Panama with a group of my peers. And while we were in Panama, we got to see this native Panamanian village. The only thing about it was, in order to get to the village, we couldn't simply drive there. Now, we actually had to take a boat nearly 2 hours down a river. So we get to the base of this river, and there we're greeted by 4 of the natives from the tribe. And they've brought with them 4 boats that they've made by hand. Now these boats, they weren't like anything I'd ever seen before. They had no aerodynamic shape to them whatsoever, no curvature at all. There was still bark surrounding the outside of it. It was rather a tree that was halved down the middle, hollowed out, and plopped in the water for us. And you can imagine we're looking at this, wondering if we're going to make it back alive or not, but there's no choice here, so we climb in. And then we meet our guide for the voyage. And he doesn't speak English at all, he only speaks the native tongue, so there's only one thing that he tells us, and that's that his name is Wampy. And right off the bat, we notice that Wampy, compared to the other 3 men from the tribe, was a little different. See, the other 3 men were really muscular, had this very manly build to them, whereas Wampy was rather frail. He had the build of a young boy, but certainly he was a well-aged man. We chose to disregard this, and we start out on our journey. And there's a lot of nonverbal communication taking place. Wampy's teaching us how to row, when to row, how to lean, and when to lean. And after a while, we think we got the hang of this. We're smooth sailing. Until up ahead, we hear the might of what's to come. And finally, as it rolls into view, we see the first boat enter the rapids, only to nearly capsize and dump half the people out of the boat. Upon this sight, you can just imagine the utter sense of fear and terror that engulfed all of us in our boat. So much so that we resorted to burying our faces into our legs. And it's just before I'm about to do this that I look at the front of our boat, and there I see Wampy. Not sitting crouched down as we all were, but rather standing with his foot planted out in front of him, his paddle in his hands, ready to fend off any rock that came in our way. And we enter the rapids. And by none other than God himself, we make it through the rapids untouched. And after another hour or so in the boat, we get to the village. And it's everything we ever imagined it to be. Total beauty and tranquility, but it was there when we noticed it. See, all the other men in the village, regardless of their age, had a tribal marking. Some even covering the entirety of their bodies, whereas Wampy was the only man with not even one. And we were fortunate enough to get to spend the day with the native tribe. But as the day went on and we interacted with them and we watched them interact amongst themselves, it became abundantly clear that Wampy was treated inferiorly. And this really troubled me because to us in our boat, Wampy was our fearless leader. But to his own people, he's a mere subordinate. See, in our world, we have a lot of misconceptions surrounding leadership. We all have an image in our minds of what a leader looks like, what a leader does, or what a leader should do. And if we encounter someone that doesn't fit this image, we tend to not consider them a leader. By a show of hands, how many people here today would consider themselves to be a leader? That's great. But what if I said that we all possess the equal capacity to lead? Because what is leadership? What does leadership actually mean? See, haven't each one of us here today influenced a friend, a family member, a colleague, led them to a certain decision, to a certain course of action? This is leadership at its core. Leadership is quite simply one life, one person influencing another. But we tend to make it more complex than that. We think that leadership is something beyond us. Leadership is only for a select few, or that you have to be born a leader. But when we have this view, we actually neglect to acknowledge the power, the influence, and the impact that we can have in each other's lives. See, Hollywood and TV, they love to paint this image to us as leaders being the loudest voice in the room, the person who's in charge, tells people what to do, or the person who comes up with all the great ideas. But this couldn't be anything further from the truth. And it's not the responsibility of leadership to come up with all the ideas. It's the responsibility of leadership to create an environment where great ideas are made, where great ideas can thrive. And so often when we think of someone who's in charge, someone with power or authority, we think, well, they must be a leader because they're the ones telling people what to do. Our managers, our CEOs, but it's not always the case that they are. It might just be the case that the person at your organization who's the leader has no positional power at all, is in no position of authority. But they work really hard, although they're at the bottom of the pyramid. But whenever you work alongside them, it does something to you. It changes you because they make you work harder and they make you work smarter. That's because they're a leader. Because leaders motivate, leaders inspire, and leaders impact the lives of those around them. See, leaders don't lead through their authority, their power to tell people what to do. Leaders lead through their influence and nothing else. But so often do we get the terms leadership and authority confused. But they are not the same by any means. Because authority, responsibility, titles, these are all granted to you. But only your behavior can earn you respect. And in our modern world, it's so easy to get caught up in what we're doing, our new job, our promotion, our project that we're working on, or what we're going to study in school. But we can't forget that these things are not what we're going to be remembered for. We aren't remembered for what we do. We're remembered for what we do for others. And you might be sitting here today thinking, well, that's great and all, but I know myself, and I know I'm not a leader. It's just not my personality. But I have to ask you to stop lying to yourself today. Because the truth is that you, just like everyone else, possesses the same abilities to lead. The only thing about leadership is that it's a choice. And just because you haven't made the choice yet, doesn't mean you never will. And it certainly doesn't mean that you can't. Because wedding soup is not Italian, and leaders aren't always in charge. Thanks.